On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Olympia and Felicity Ace. Why do car carriers keep catching on fire? I am your host, Sal McCoglana. Welcome to this episode of What's Going On with Shipping. As you can tell, we're in a different locale today, high up in the mountains of North Carolina. However, there's still a lot going on with shipping news, in particularly the fires on board the car carrier Felicity Ace, which we reported about the other day, and now a new fire, this one aboard the Euroferry Olympia, sailing between Greece and Italy. And the question has come up, why are there so many car carrier fires? And what is the difference between these two fires? And what can be done to prevent similar fires in the future? Let's go ahead and update the stories of where the ships are right now and their status. So this is the latest update on G-Captain's site regarding the car ferry Olympia. The story here, posted by Mike Schuller, is a reboot of a story from Reuters. Fire engulfs Grimaldi ferry traveling from Greece to Italy, 8 missing. Just looked at the latest BBC story on this, and they're showing 11 people missing, largely truck drivers or lorry drivers, as they're referred to, from a lot of Balkan countries. So let's delve here into the story a bit. This one reports that 8 passengers were missing after a fire engulfed a ferry sailing from Greece to Italy. A total of 240 passengers, 51 crew were on board the Italian-flagged Euroferry Olympia when the fire broke out. And rescue vessels have taken off most of them to the island of Corfu, where ambulances were waiting. The Greek fire brigade said 2 men trapped in the ship's garage had been rescued. That's the deck area where the cargo is stored. Firefighters were trying to reach the other 3. Grimaldi Lines, the owner of the vessel, said 8 passengers were missing. As I said to you before, BBC, in a story just a few hours ago, has it that search continues for 12 people missing on board the ferry. Aerial footage, and you can see some of it right here, released by the Coast Guard, shows rows of burnt trucks on the blackened deck after flames swept through the 183-meter, 600-foot ferry that had been making a 9-hour journey through the night. This is a quote from one of the truck drivers. The worst thing is the cars in the garage are glued next to each other. There's no escape route. So real quick, this vessel, unlike Felicity Ace, is a ferry, meaning it loads private and commercial vehicles. People drive them up themselves. Their own drivers will drive them onto this ferry. And this ferry then will take them between 2 designated routes, in this case, Greece and Italy. Now, those vehicles are loaded. They could be fully fueled. There could be material in the back. Nobody really knows for sure. You usually have to sign a waiver of some kind, ensuring that there's no hazardous material on board, but you can never be 100% sure what is on board these vehicles. Fire suppression on board these vessels are different than what you would see on board Felicity Ace, for example, the car carrier. These vessels would have water spray sprinkler systems in the decks. They're not worried about humidity control because the vehicles aren't on board the vessel for a long period of time. Plus, they don't own the vehicle, so they really don't care if you get a little saltwater damage to your vehicle. That's your own risk if you take it. So usually you would have a sprinkler fire suppression system in this area, but note that there are vehicles on the top deck of this vessel, and we're not exactly sure where this fire originated. We do know it was in the garage deck, but we don't know where the fire started and what caused it. We also don't know about whether the crew initiated fire suppression. One of the bigger differences, too, on the Olympia versus the Felicity Ace is you have passengers. Your priority on board a ship is the passengers, not the cargo. So if they determined that they had to get those passengers off, the majority of the crew would have been involved in rescue operations to get the personnel off the vessel, vice trying to suppress the fire. But there should have been automated fire suppression systems that were hitting those cargo decks with sprinkler water, salt water coming from the sea through their fire pumps. We'll go on here with the story. Oh, a little bit too far there, sorry. A little too far ahead of myself there. Here we go. The cause of the blaze is still being investigated. At least 10 people were taken to a Corfu hospital, most with breathing problems, a Greek health ministry official told state television. Early on Friday, passengers huddled in yellow blankets on an Italian rescue vessel as huge plumes of smoke poured out of the ferry. One video showed the word Mayday was repeatedly blasting from the speakers in the footage uploaded on the Greek news site Proto-Thema. I'll show you a video taken by Euronews that really kind of captures the events as they unfolded here. Flames fully engulfing the top deck of the vessel right there. Stern is to your left side, bow to your right side. You're looking at the starboard side of the vessel. Flames coming up from the cargo decks below. Heavy black smoke from the vehicles burning on the weather deck. No telling how much that smoke has gotten through there. If you look at this a little bit, you'll see smoke damage coming from the vent areas here. Large fire up forward where the smoke is. Obviously, the vessel was in serious condition. The crew could not get a handle on this fire. And again, these vehicles are packed in there really tight, bumper to bumper, door to door, to get as many vehicles on board as you can. And if you can't get that initial suppression down quickly, then these fires have the ability to jump from vehicle to vehicle. Plus, these vehicles I mentioned to you before are loaded. So it's not clear exactly what was on board this vessel as the ship was transiting from Greece to Italy. A little more information here in the story. It carried 153 vehicles, most of them trucks, according to the Grimaldi lines. The fire broke out when the ship was near Corfu in the Ionian Sea. Hours after the alarm was raised, the vessel was still ablaze, drifting in Albanian waters. At around 3:30, 4 a.m., I smelled smoke. Rumen Meditov, a Bulgarian truck driver, told Bulgaria's BNT channel, the trucks and the documents, everything burned. There was no chance to put the fire out. Bulgaria's reported 127 of their citizens are on board. Goes on here to talk about the flames were incredibly high. We were a few miles away from the ferry when it happened. Colonello Felice Lavaco Simone Cicchetti from Italy's financial police, who took part in the rescue operation. The fire was so big and fast that in a matter of 5 minutes, it became unmanageable for the people on board. So again, fire this size on board a commercial ferry operating with vehicles and who knows what else on board is a very dangerous situation. The good news is that most of the personnel had gotten off the vessel. However, we still have reports of anywhere from 5 to 12 people still missing on board. And those rescue operations are going to continue. Let's take a look at where the ship is currently. So this is marine traffic. For those of you unfamiliar with marine traffic, this is the site that tracks all the AIS transponder signals from vessels so that you can tell anywhere in the world where vessels are. Here you can see the Euroferry. Here's the island of Corfu. Here's Greece, Albania, and then Italy over here. And if we zoom in on the area a bit, you'll see the amount of vessels in around the area around Euroferry Olympia right now. Vessel is adrift right now, moving at 1.3 knots on a course of 113, roughly east-southeast. You'll see some vessels standing by the area right there, probably tugs and salvage vessels. The key thing now is going to be getting salvage vessels and tugs out. There are already vessels out there providing fire suppression, Coast Guard from Albania, from Greece, from Italy on scene. They're going to have to tow the vessel into port to complete the fire suppression. It's very hard to get a fire out inside a car carrier because the fire is usually on the interior. This vessel had vehicles on the top deck. So that was part of the fire suppression you saw right there. They were able to suppress the water, use water suppression on the side to cool the hull, but to find those last 11 people who are missing, they're going to have to get on board the vessel and go searching, which is going to be extremely difficult due to heat, smoke in the area. It's a very confined area to be doing any of these searches. That is the story of the Euroferry Olympia. Let's get an update now on Felicity Ace, which is the car carrier that caught fire off the Azores. So this is again marine traffic. This is Felicity Ace. You'll see her here southwest of the Azores, adrift at this time, abandoned. And plans are underway for a salvage team from Smith Marine of Boskalis, a Dutch firm, one of the best salvage outfits in the world. They did the salvage on Ever Given back in March in the Suez. They're going to get a team on board. They're going to have to try to get the fire under control. We'll show you some latest pictures of it. It looks like fire has burnt its way through most of the vessel at this point. They will try to get a tow line on her and tow her into port. According to latest information, she's not going to go into the Azores because the vessel is too large to go into the ports there in the Azores. So they're going to have to tow her to a port either in Europe or across to America. She's about halfway there where the Azores is right now. So the question is going to be is where the salvage is going to take place. Here's some of the latest reports. This is a GCAPTN story right here. You can see the images of Felicity Ace, still smoking, still see the smoke coming off of her. You can clearly see the deck arrangements on her because of the burn patterns on the vessel, especially right here along the bow. You can see how that entire deck got extremely hot on the interior of the vessel and burnt literally through it and then off the side. And there's some more images here. You'll see those vehicles inside. Again, this is different than what we see on Olympia. On board Felicity Ace, these are brand new cars. These cars are packed, again, bumper to bumper, door to door. Many more vehicles are on this vessel than you saw on Olympia. But again, you don't have passengers on this. You only have 22 crew on board this vessel. All the crew live up here in the very top two decks. Bridge is the very top deck, and then living quarters just below it. The fire suppression is different in these vessels. You don't have salt water sprinklers in these holds, because one of the things that happens in these holds is they want to maintain climate and humidity control in there. These vehicles are brand new, wrapped in plastic. They don't want salt water corroding the vehicles. And so they have to maintain humidity. And if you have salt water pipes in there that can discharge, even if it's a dry system, you're still letting humidity in there. So what they have is carbon dioxide systems, but there's not enough carbon dioxide to flood the entire ship. You don't have that many bottles of carbon dioxide. So what you have to do is try to get the initial fire suppression when the fire starts, segregate the area by curtains and other ways to close out that area, flood that area with CO2, displace the oxygen, and knock the fire out, which works great in fires with traditional gas and diesel. Not so good with EV, electrical vehicles, because CO2 will not knock out that fire, because once the lithium ion batteries start burning, they produce hydrogen. They basically are able to survive in that CO2 environment and still burn. Let's go ahead and check out this update story here. This is a Reuters story that they put out. Salvage team from Smith en route to retrieve the abandoned Felicity Ace, which continues to burn. A ship carrying 4,000 vehicles, and we got an update on that I'll show you here in a second, caught fire. Lithium ion batteries and electrical cars on board the vehicle carrier Felicity Ace had caught fire, and the blaze required specialist equipment to extinguish, according to Captain João Mendes Cabacas of the port of Audis, which is in the Azores. It's not clear whether the batteries first sparked the fire. And I think that's something we have to be clear about. We don't know what started the fire. However, once a EV car, an electrical vehicle, burns, it is a very tough fire to put out. I've been a volunteer firefighter for 20-something years now, been to EV car fires. You can dump the entire amount of water in all our fire trucks on it, and you're not putting it out. It just continues to burn, which is fine on an isolated road on a highway somewhere. But when you're on a vehicle carrier with vehicles packed side by side to it, that's a big problem. Story goes on here, talks a little bit more about the vehicle, the vessel itself, and we already have this in our previous video. She's about 200 meters long, about 650 feet, 17,000 tons, built in 2005. She's a Japanese ship, MOL lines. She's registered in Panama. We're not sure about the crew, what the nationality of the crew is. Towboats are en route from Gibraltar, Netherlands, with 3 due to arrive by Wednesday. He added the vessel could not be towed to Azores because it would block trade at the port. 16-person salvage team from Smith Salvage, owned by Bocalis, was sent to the ship. The Panamanian flag ship, owned by Snowscape Car Carriers SA and managed by Mitsu OSK, was traveling from Emden, where Volkswagen has a factory, to Davisville. 22 crew members were evacuated on Wednesday when the fire broke out with no one hurt. There's a great video I'll include it in the show notes here of the Portuguese, I'm not sure if it was a Coast Guard or Navy, lifting crew members off the burning vessel and depositing them on Resilient Warrior, the tanker that was nearby. It appears that about half the crew may have abandoned the vessel. They may have been told to get off the vessel for safety, while the other half remained on board for fire suppression. When the fire got out of control, then they had to be taken off. That's when the Portuguese helicopter came in, lifted them off, landed those 11 to join the other 11 from their lifeboat on board Resilient Warrior. Just epic. I got to say, anytime you see a helicopter rescue at sea and you see those personnel get down on the hoist to go grab crew members, absolutely just, I can't say enough about those people that do it, men and women both who do it. It's absolutely phenomenal. Goes on here, about 1,100 Porsches and 189 Bentleys were on board. So you get a lot of vehicles on board. There's a follow-up story here, which I, of course, will include, which goes in a little more detail from Volkswagen about the makeup of the vehicles on board. Talking about 3,965 vehicles. This is according to Volkswagen AG. Porsche, Audis, and Lamborghinis. More than 100 of these were heading for Port Houston. This is a definite concern for everyone involved. And I want to take just one moment here to say one other thing, which I think is fairly impressive across social media. And I got contacted about this quite a lot. Car carrier on fire in the Atlantic, crew safe, everyone's happy about that. But then it turned into, let's get a boat and let's go salvage this vessel because we'll own all the vehicles on board. Okay, marine salvage does not work that way. It is not an issue of finders keepers. If you find a boat on fire in the middle of the ocean, you can't just go on board and claim it as your own. This is not the way it works. That only works with European colonization and imperialism. It doesn't work with marine salvage. So I found it very amusing and humorous, but that's not the way it works. Actually, what happens in marine salvage is the marine salver, whoever does salvage the vessel, is usually hired by the ship owner or the cargo insurer to go get it. A fee is usually worked out. And then later on, if they can't come to a firm decision on the cost above the fee, because they will get a salvage bonus, then it will go to an arbitration. And it's usually determined on the value of the cargo. A certain segment of that will go to the salvage company. But outfits like Smith Salvage will have agreements in place ready to go. They have pre-positioned equipment around the world so that they can sortie and do operations to save vessels like this. All right, for the last part of this video, I want to talk about car carriers and ferries in general for just a second, because this seems to be a proliferation of these events. And I'm not just talking about Olympia and Felicity Ace. This has been going on for quite a while. This story right here from Drive Mag talks about this, talks about disasters involving car carriers. And if you go down here, they run through a list of them. This story, I think, was written about 2017. And then I'll update it a little bit more here. So, in 2002, you got the motor vessel Tricolor, the car carrier from Wallenius Lines, basically capsized, sank. You see it right there that she was lost there due to a stability issue. Go on here, you can see them. They actually cut this vessel in slices to get it out, did a big kind of cut. The same thing they did with the Golden Ray down in Brunswick, Georgia. The Carcarrier right here was a vessel that sank also due to a stability issue. Excuse me, it didn't sink, but it was a stability issue. They were exchanging ballast on a trans-Pacific route, and the vessel heeled over to one side, and you'll see her right there. She was brought into Dutch Harbor in Alaska. The Baltic Ace is a vessel that was involved in a collision, and following the collision, the vessel sank. And again, they had to do this cut where they cut the vessel into pieces to get her out. They sliced her. There you can see the bow of the vessel actually upside down, and you can see the car decks and the vehicles on the car decks right there. The Höegh Osaka, again, another stability issue here, where stability of the vessel was compromised and the vessel had a massive heeling motion coming out of port. And you can see her there on her side. Modern Express, again, another good example of that, another stability issue involved in this. We've seen this repeatedly on these vessels. And then updated further from the 2017 story, you've got other examples here. So, for example, you got the Höegh Xiamen, which was in the port of Jacksonville, Florida. She was offloading vehicles, and due to improper unhooking of the car batteries, a fire started on board the vessel. Involved fire suppression with the crew and the Jacksonville, Florida Fire Department. Several members of the crew and members of the Jacksonville Fire Department were hurt in this fire evolution. The vessel was declared a total loss right there at the dock in Jacksonville. This is back in 2020. And again, we had a similar issue too, completely different from a commercial, but a vessel similar in configuration, the Bonhomme Richard in San Diego, had a fire on one of its vehicle decks, and that entire vessel was lost. The Golden Ray, mentioned her a little while ago, leaving from Brunswick, Georgia, had improper stability on board. I did a whole video just specifically on this vessel where we talked about it in the NTSB report. Leaving Brunswick, Georgia, she heeled over to the side, got out of the channel, and sank. Fortunately, all the crew was saved, but again, they did that cutting of the vessel in the harbor there, in the sound of St. Simon Sounds in Brunswick. And that's been a pollution and ecological disaster for that area. But again, we see this time and time again. Looking at the Olympia fire, Grimaldi Lines, who was the owner of the Euroferry Olympia, suffered a very similar fire on board this vessel, the Grand America, which caught fire, crew had abandoned, and this vessel sank in the Bay of Biscay. Very similar event to what we saw take place right now off the coast of Greece. This is back in 2019. The Sincerity Ace, which is a sister ship to the Felicity Ace, suffered nearly the same exact event that's going on with Felicity Ace right now, took place with the Sincerity Ace in the Northern Pacific. Here you see the U.S. flagged car carrier Green Lake. Green Lake performed a massive rescue operation here. Matter of fact, was awarded a Gallant Ship Award from the Maritime Administration for conducting this. But this fire on board Sincerity Ace was very similar to it. 16 of the 21 crew members were rescued, 5 died on board. What's interesting about this fire took place on December 31st, 2018. This ship, just like Felicity Ace, is registered in Panama. An investigation was done on this vessel, and the report has still not been released, so that we don't know for sure what caused this report. Absolutely a tragedy and travesty that this was done. Last story I want to relieve you with and talk about just timing. It's amazing. This is a story that G Captain ran. It was completely independent of what you're seeing right now, Olympia. So electrical vehicles identified. So Rich Madden posted this story. And again, I can't talk about the coincidence that this story comes out, but it deals specifically with fires on board, roll-on, roll-off, and passenger vessels, and specifically EV, electrical vehicles. And you'll see right here, they're talking about as far back as 2013, the German Federal Ministry of Transport, Building and Urban Development had commissioned a study to determine if the carriage of EVs on roll-on passenger vessels or roll-on, roll-off vessels increased the risk of fire on board. And the conclusion was yes. The quote from the report, in the event of a lithium-ion battery catching fire, it is important to note that such a fire reaches very high temperature, produces toxic gases, and is inextinguishable. In other words, you can't put it out. There was a 2016 report from DNV, that's a major classification society for vessels, and it focused on electrical vessels. And it included a series of recommendations. Quick release of fixed firefighting systems is important. You have that 10 to 15 minute window to do it. Shift of cargo represents a risk, and the policy on how to handle alternative fuel vehicles should be developed. It goes on here with even more. The Coast Guard issued a marine safety alert in June of 2020 on recognizing fire hazards and proper cargo storage on roll-on, roll-off vessels. It talks about the accident report from Sincerity Ace not being released. This is some great images. This shows you the interior of a car carrier, just like Felicity Ace. You see the vehicles nose to nose, door to door, wrapped in that plastic, all set inside the hull. And you can see how if one vehicle catches on fire, it jumps like dominoes to the next. It's one of the biggest problems with it. And perhaps the craziest thing about this whole story right here was the fact that right here, Captain Jim Staple gave a talk on February 17th. I'm filming this on February 19th. On February 17th, he gave this talk. The Ship Operations Cooperative Program hosted a presentation by Captain Jim Staples of Ocean River, quote, understanding the risk when carrying electrical vehicles on a vessel. That whole talk is right here. I'll have it linked into the show notes. You are free to take a look at it. I strongly suggest you do. It's great. And one of the things he talks about in here, and it's highlighted in this story, he talks about the construction of lithium-ion batteries, the hazard of the construction of those vehicles and the batteries, the overview of recent Ro-Ro fires and the challenges of EV firefighting, identified quick reference for emergency response to EV fires from manufacturers and the National Firefighting Protection Agency, and then the current best practices, including thermal cameras for early identification of thermal runaway. When a lithium fire goes, it's going to go ahead and you'll see it take off. And some people take that as an explosion. It's not an explosion, but it is the lithium ion batteries dumping their electrical load at that moment. And again, this happens just as we see the fires take place on board Olympia and Felicity Ace. So great timing. My views of this is the International Maritime Organization classification societies, port state control countries, and everyone who takes and receives these vessels need to take a moment and rethink, how are we operating these vessels? Is there sufficient fire prevention and fire detection on board these vessels? This sounds like a lot of fires. It really does. It's like, holy cow, Sal, you just went down a list of instability and car issues. It's a lot, but understand the volume of this trade. It is significant. These ships represent less than 1% of what we're talking about in the normal transport of vehicles and passengers around the world. It is overwhelmingly safe. However, when accidents do occur, they need to be addressed with. And when you are having reoccurring accidents, when you're having reoccurring stability issues on car carriers, when you're having fires, especially Grimaldi line seems to be having it quite a bit here on their car carriers, then it is the impetus of the flags of registry, the port state control, and more importantly, the International Maritime Organization to enact laws to protect people going on ships. People get on ships, on car ferries throughout Europe all the time and the world. They expect the vessel to be safe. They expect the vessels to have safety features. And again, some of the worst tragedies we see in the maritime sector are on ferries and these type of vessels, because people find themselves in a position they don't expect to ever be in. We have a lot of high value, high visibility now, because you see these all the time. You have people like me talking about it and bringing it right to you on your phone, in your home, wherever you are. So this is why this is of extreme importance. And I hope to see some good come out of this, especially if we're talking about the loss of life, which seems more probable than not right now on the Olympia. The Felicity Ace, fortunately, all the crew got off. But again, somebody's without 1,000, Porsches and Lamborghinis, or 4,000 Porsches and Lamborghinis and vehicles. That's going to severely economically hurt them, the car companies. But more importantly, we're talking about loss of life here. And then, of course, pollution into the environment. This has multitude of effects across the board. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed our location here high in the mountains of North Carolina. We'll be back to our normal studios meaning my home office and work office, shortly. If you did, please share the video across social media. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos when they come out. Leave a comment. I don't get everything right. I probably made a mistake or 2 or 50 or 100, who knows. Feel free to do it. Comment in there. I always love my comments that I get, especially those who can contribute and construct to the narrative of this story. I enjoy that a lot. And if you can, become a Patreon. That allows me to continue doing this and support the channel as we bring you news about shipping. Until our next broadcast, this is Sal signing off.